The EU organic regulation, where does it come from? Where will it go to? In 1986, a handful of IFOM members formed the IFOM EU delegation. They approached the EU Commission. The Commission was and still is the one single institution within the European Union that may draft a law. It's not the Parliament, it's not the Member States. They may not even change a draft of the Commission, but they must get the Commission to change their draft in order to achieve anything. So, why was the Commission approached? The Commission was asked to provide for protection of organics under the law. Protection against what? It was asked to provide for protection against the challenge of conventional farmers and sellers that organics can never be 100% free of the traces of environmental pollution. Why would that be a problem? Those actors said, when you say organic, consumers believe that the product is free of traces of industrial residues. This was an earnest challenge. These were my first cases when I became active in that field at that time. And there were competing green labels that stood for nothing more than trying to reduce the use of modern potent pesticides to the minimum needed. The negotiations went back and forth 5 years. The major problem was the organic farmers had long periods of conversion, 2 years, 3 years. In that time, they were used to sell their produce as organic in conversion. The Commission said no. The Commission said, we do not accept a kind of a second market. We want to have one single organic market, and it must be crystal clear. The Commission knew better than the farmers' organizations how to sell organic. I think it was a bit of an institutional arrogance. But on the other hand, in 1991, there was the regulation EEC 2092 from 91 in the official journal as the law. And it was one-to-one, more or less, what came from the IFOM standards. So government basically protected what the private sector had developed. This did not apply to animal standards, and concerning animal ingredients in plant organic products, it referred to the private standards. I understand, I interpret this as a legislative public-private partnership. The idea is an initiative of a small group of farmers was now protected by law as a model agricultural production concept. Who will be the guardian of the standards? Well, the IFOM delegation said the standards are what we learned to manage to do, what we can do in practice. The standards are what our practice is. And exactly this practice was considered sufficient to be a clear alternative to conventional agriculture, practically a thorn in the flesh of conventional agriculture. In 1993, this worked well, as well, with respect to processing standards. They were added to the regulation, and the positive lists from the Organic Association standards became the law. The consensus of the organic community ruled. Then 5 years of a very difficult discussion on animal standards followed. Here the relationship between the organic community and the EU Commission became uneasy. The Commission said no to diverse rules reflecting the diversity of agroeconomic conditions in the regions. Animal husbandry in the Alps is different from pastoralism in Ireland or keeping animals in Portugal. However, the Commission insisted on uniform rules and considered flexibility, derogations, exemptions as poisonous to what? Well, to the European Union concept of a uniform common market. In 2004, the Commission responded to requests from the organic community to have an action plan. There were lots of different voices from the organic community to do something for organic agriculture. And the response of the Commission spoke from a point of view of a uniform European market controlled by uniform European law. And there were lots of surprises. The Commission, for example, said no to organic logos of farmers' associations. It presented a draft in 2006 that aimed at outlawing the farmers' logos. This was based on the argument it's hard to sell Danish yogurt in Belgium because the Belgian market expects, well, logos of farmers' associations familiar to consumers. So the Commission decided to suppress this. The total revision of the law of 1991, which followed in 2007, was not a total revision. Something was added. It was aims and principles. But these are not law. They were just like a preamble to a law. They were nothing substantive. And, well, what happened was the EU organic law was cut in 3 separate regulations. Only some words were added, which meant nothing but good intentions. It's true that the organic community asked for these words. The organic community wished to have something in the law which would make it easier for consumers, for the general public to understand what organic is. Well, I think that was a bad idea to introduce marketing texts into law. I think law should rule and not be filled with advertisements. But it was done, and as such, the aims and principles do not hurt. What really hurt was that the dividing up of the text, new structure of the text, caused a lot of work for years and years. Thousands of pages of new operating manuals, wasted years. What was the problem? Well, the Commission rather saw institutional aspects like dividing up the text between Council, between Commission, and a separate import or structure. It was considerations from the viewpoint of somebody drawing the law, but not for practical application, but for institutional purposes. Let's leave the past and look forward. The EU organic logo has been introduced in 2010. It is not easily recognizable as an organic logo. Actually, it's non-distinctive. It doesn't fulfill its purpose. Nothing like that would happen in a private company. I touch the history a little bit in order to make understood why I think one should not call for the EU Commission to touch the EU organic food law. This should be done only every 10 years or 20 years or so, but not more often. So what's the problem? The problem is that first the Commission said we will suppress all private logos, we'll suppress all national logos. Then the member states said, oh, please don't do that. The Commission said, well, then if we don't do that, we make the EU logo obligatory. Then the EU member states said, well, this looks, if the logo is on a food product, it looks like a European Union product. So how do we deal with that? Well, that's where the language comes from, non-EU agriculture. It's just to make the intrinsic well, false, misleading message of an EU logo to correct it somehow. Now, in the proposal, or in the assessment of what is wrong about EU organic law, we hear it's bad that this logo does not contain any message concerning, well, organics. When this was discussed, there were suggestions to have the code of the certifiers used as a single identifier, this eco or org particle. But the Commission said, well, we understand this would work for the message it's organic, but it would not work for the message it's we, the EU, who did something about it. So the EU Commission cared more about their own corporate image, enhancing that image, than doing something practical. But looking forward, I think we have a history in organic agriculture of resilience. Resilience is the capacity to cope with perturbation and disturbance. There was perturbation in the third week of January. This is the headline of a big German news magazine, a weekly magazine, Der Spiegel, the Mirror, and it says, the Brussels organic bomb, Brüsseler Biobombe. Where there is organic on the label, it's often not organic. This is the conclusion reached by the EU Commission, and therefore the EU Commission will make the rules for organic food drastically more severe. Wow, what's that? Well, that's language. That's the language from the paper that was leaked from the Commission to the media. It's language from the executive summary of the impact assessment with which the Commission presents a proposal, 100 pages or so. It was with the media. And it said, well, organic production rules are watered down by exceptions as a description of what the EU law today is, what the EU Commission enacted in 2007 and before in 1991. And there is lots of language like that. The organic market has built on consumer confidence, but it is at risk now. Well, that's strong language. I have an opinion. My opinion is, first, this is abusive, slanderous language. The Commission, the staff who wrote this, violate the obligations of the Commission to behave in an amicable way in dealing with their own law. So there will be I will file a complaint to the EU Ombudsman concerning the misconduct in writing this. But this has a second aspect. I wondered how this came to the Spiegel. And what I learned is that these draft documents were solely within the EU Commission. They were given into the intra-DG, a process, coordination process. There are general directorates, Agri, Sanco, a couple of others, and they are asked as well what they think about the draft and whether they would change it. And I wondered, why would somebody from the Commission breach their, well, the professional secrecy they are obliged to observe? And first I thought, well, whoever comes up and says, we don't like this draft, he would look bad, or she would look bad. First I thought, well, maybe it's the IFOAM EU group, or any other actors from the sector that would not really dare to speak up against the draft. But yesterday, I understood it better. It became clear to me that the IFOAM EU group expects this intra-commission coordination process to change the language of the law. That one of the other general directorates would speak up against this draft, and maybe this would lead to a change. I think there is zero possibility, because the others would look bad in the public, because there is already a clear message that whoever speaks up is for a weak organic food law. And that's why I think this was leaked to the press as a part of, let's say, the intra-commission struggle between the general directorates, Agri, Sanco, and maybe others. I will find a complaint to Olaf. Olaf is the Office Européen Anti-Fraud. It is kind of a public prosecutor within the system, and it frequently investigates the breach of professional secrecy by EU Commission staff. I think there was a severe breach, and I think there is an obvious political motive to suppress the opinion-forming process within the Commission. This is politics like body contact sport. Amazing. The Commission writes that it will do something for the reduction of bureaucracy. There is too much reporting required. How will they do that? They say, we strike out all exemptions with the exception of those for natural catastrophes. What does that do? Well, we have about 130 reporting requirements, and when we strike the exemptions, then we drop about 30 of these. That's the big anti-bureaucratic step the Commission argues to take. Well, that's funny, strange, and provocative. But I think it's not really meant that way. It's not really that those who write this language, that they believe that. It's rather a result of a, let's say, plastic way to make plastic politics. What do I mean by plastic politics? I mean a political, let's say, defining a political strategy in something which is described by abstract rules. The review of the organic farming legislation is a part of the Commission's regulatory fitness and performance program. It's called REFIT, regulatory fitness. And when you look at how this is implemented, you find there must be an impact assessment, there must be a public consultation, there is an online questionnaire. There is an 80-page paper on how to do an impact assessment for anything, not only for organics, of course, for pesticides, for tires, whatever. And it always follows the same rules, and the language you find now in these drafts is just a mirror of this language, and what is quite obvious is that those who worked in the Commission on this, they just try to fill in this abstract form and somehow to somehow deal with it. So the Commission says, well, we listened to everybody. Well, that's true, they listened to everybody, but they had already decided what to do before had already decided what to do before they asked the public. The Commission says, that's very wrong. Okay. The Commission says we listen to everybody. Yeah, that's true. They listen to labor unions, to tourist organizations, to the conventional agro-industry, to animal activists. All of these actors, it's perfectly fine. They are actors from the society, but it creates a cacophony of opinions, and those who really know about organic farming, they are practically lost. The commissioner said, it's important for us to go to a principle-driven approach to drive the EU law principle-driven. Now, Dacian Cioloș has been addressed as the most well-meaning commissioner towards organic agriculture at all. I agree, he is most well-meaning. But it's hard to understand how he implements this well-meaningness. There has been an agreement signed between the United States and the EU 2 years ago here in the BIOFACH, and Cioloș said, put in simple words, this agreement means that organic food certified in Europe or in the United States may be sold as organic on either side of the Atlantic. That's fine. I'm very much for international trade. But in this case, this means the US law permits organic food with synthetic vitamins and mineral compounds. You can say, well, why not? Yeah, I say that too. You can discuss that. But on the other hand, to have ECTOP, there will be a presentation on 12 o'clock, discuss in very details why they don't like certain things because they are too pure, too technical or whatever, and on the other side, the floodgates are opened to US organic products produced in the US and distributed here with the EU logo, but produced under US organic law. It's hard to understand why this is the result of 10 years of negotiation. I had a court session on Wednesday in Luxembourg with the Court of the European Union. It was about a product, a dietary product produced in Germany, an organic juice with an iron compound for pregnant women. And the producer said, well, we are legally required to add this because we could not get the iron level with agricultural ingredients from organic or whatever. So we must add it as a mineral compound. The Bavarian authorities said, no, you are not allowed to. This is not really legally required because you could produce this dietary product as a non-organic product. But they said, we want to have it as an organic product. And yes, and on 2 days ago, the court asked the EU Commission whether they think there is a problem of equal treatment when the EU law prohibits something, but US organic food law permits it. So the answer of the Commission was, well, we need to think about it. The decision will be rendered in a couple of months. We will see what happens. But there is another aspect. It's GMOs. In the United States, GMOs are not allowed, but there is no limit to GMO traces, and seeds with genetic modifications may be used by organic farmers who do not intend to use GMOs as such. Well, it's a very pragmatic approach, but it leads to a practically unlimited presence of genetic modification in organic produce, and they can be imported into the EU now. It's difficult to understand why this equivalence agreement was negotiated over 10 years, has created this situation. I think there will be convergence. Full mutual recognition will lead to practical convergence of organic rules in the EU and the US. The US has a very pragmatic approach. I like this pragmatic approach generally, but I'm very hesitant to think that this is the right way to deal with organic products. I wrote the march to the lowest common denominator. That's a little bit impolite. One could say it's the march to the US level, to the US denominator. It makes things easy here because you don't need to have ECTOP when you refer to US rules. Let me go to 3 more aspects of the future, the proposed EU organic law. Certification is integrated into general food inspection. There was some language to 882 already in 2007, but it was very vague language and it was not really implemented. Now the responsibility shall really move from DG Agri to DG Sanco, what concerns organic certification. And when you look into the language, you see that it talks about the notification of organic operators of their organic activities to the public authorities. And no longer are organic certificates issued by the certifying bodies, but by the public authorities. And they are to be issued as a result of official controls. So what do the organic certifiers do? They go out, find the facts, report the facts to the authorities, and the authorities render the certification decision. What is very clear is that the aspect of a submission of operators by contract to organic certification is dropped. There is no need for a contract with the operator anymore, and I think this will lead in many member states to a situation where the authorities, if at all they use organic certifiers, private organic certifiers, will use them as a tool to get the facts, and it will be their tool, and they will assign the, I think, the organic certifiers to operate under their control, on their behalf, and paid from public money. The organic operators will no longer choose their organic certifier, not the farmer and not the processor. That is what I think will happen. The EU Commission also leaked one piece of paper, and this piece of paper says absence of pesticide residues guaranteed beyond baby food level. So it must not be higher than the baby food level, and if it's higher, the product is declassified automatically. Investigation, merely investigation, only below the baby food level. That's what this says. It will be in the delegated Commission legislation. It's not in the draft now, but the Commission leaked this paper in order to make clear where it goes to. This must be read together with new language. Whenever there is addressed something which was called an irregularity before, it now refers to a violation of the integrity of product. There is one single point in the considerations where the draft talks about the integrity of production. So the draft makes a distinction, and I think this distinction targets at something. It means that only when the integrity of the product as something which can be analyzed in the product is found, an irregularity may be followed up by stopping a lot from being distributed as an organic product. What will this lead to? This will lead to sampling in the shops, a big problem when you have a heterogeneity in the lots. You can ask, why is this so big problem? Good companies, they do a lot of testing, and usually they will not be beyond the BNN orientation values. Yes, usually they won't, but if they are, it's a big problem when you have it in the law, because especially, for example, when you have dried apricots or whatever, or you have very heterogeneous lots, and you can't exclude being higher than this level by sampling of the lot before it's packed. So what will happen is the food authorities will go out into the shops, take the samples, find levels a little bit higher, and put it in the rapid alert system, have the produce taken from the shops and destroyed on the spot. I think that's a big problem. It's food waste. I think it's nonsense. This has a very particular aspect. I mentioned this whole thing started as a defense against people who said you can't prevent industrial residues in organic products, but that's what the consumer expects, and therefore the EU law said, well, no, you don't expect that, we don't define organic like this. Now, when you refer to the levels in baby food, it's not 0.01 milligram per kilogram. In reality, it's 0.003 milligram per kilogram for the chlorine organic pesticides, very persistent pesticides. It's annexes 22 and 23 of the German Diätverordnung and the respective directive of the EU. So in my home area around Basel, you will most likely not be able to produce organic milk because there have been lindan storages 20, 30 years ago, but they were all over the place, distributed by wind, and they are still in the soil. This will create a situation where you can't do organics in many parts of the world. Very strange. I don't understand what the Commission does here. EU organic imports. The EU Commission says we want to have one compliant import standard for all certifying bodies. Compliance versus equivalence. Compliance is 100% congruent. Equivalence false. How shall this work? WTO, World Trade Organization requirements say you can't impose technical requirements which can't be met from third country producers. You must provide for an equivalence access. You can follow your legislative target, but you must not use compliance as a manner to stop international trade. This was clearly recognized in 2007. There, even the legal service of the Commission said you must provide for both compliance and equivalence to provide the organic farmers, orange farmers in Florida, a fair access to the EU market. And now, a couple of years later, this is completely lost. Well, it's new people, and the old knowledge has lost. This lesson will be learned. There will be a notification to the WTO, and I'm pretty sure that the People's Republic of China will say what it has to say and will stop this. How did this develop? It developed from, in December 2008, the Commission said in a non-paper, it was not in the law, it said, you can only be put on the equivalence list of certifiers in third countries when you are the owner of your standard. What does that mean? The idea of most actors in the field was we certify to the EU organic food law in third countries as well, and where we can't meet the requirements because something is lacking in the legislation there, or there are specific requirements in the tropics, tropical conditions, or crops not known in the EU, then we write what we need on a piece of paper, we identify what we do differently, and that's it. But the Commission said, no, we don't accept it. You must rephrase, paraphrase the EU law, and that's what happened. That's why you have 63 different standards, mostly newly written at that time, and there were several staff persons working for 2 or 3 years comparing line by line the EU law and the newly paraphrased private standards in order to find out whether they are equivalent. That's very strange. The EU management and audit scheme is something which the Commission wants to introduce in organic controls. Sadly, it was something suggested by the IFOAM EU group. Why sadly? In 1992, I stopped challenging nuclear plants for citizen initiatives because Chernobyl had happened and no longer plants were being built. So I looked for other ways to do something for the environment. One was organic agriculture, the other was the audit of companies that wanted to be acknowledged as under this eco-management and audit scheme. At that time, the idea was that government may step back from enforcing environmental requirements by their authorities, but that companies should themselves manage that. So it's a question of balance of society and government, but I soon learned, working with a group of engineers, that this works for the first step, And for the first year, you go into the company, you find a couple of things you can easily change. They are changed, everybody is happy. You do it the second year, maybe you find again something you can change and define a target, and still everybody is happy. But in the third year, you don't find anything, and people will be quite unhappy. In the fourth year, it's a disaster. This eco-management today is practically dead. It has been introduced 20 years ago, but it does not work in practice. There are only 2,000 companies in Germany who use it, some larger ones for car companies and some very small ones, but to whom I talk, people say it's extremely cumbersome, extremely expensive, and just a nuisance. This is supposed to be introduced in the EU organic law. Imagine what happens when you have a processor who is considering maybe to add an organic line to what he already does, she does. You will hardly convince somebody like that to enter into all this. The Commission will answer, oh no, Mr. Schmidt, it's not what we mean. It's not that you need to be audited and certified under the EMAs. We only include the criteria of the EMAs into organic food controls. That makes it even worse. Imagine you have the authorities in the German Länder, the organic authorities deal with this complex system. It's extremely complex and extremely demanding, and I think it will just be useless, bureaucratic, strange. But we asked for it. What is the result? The result is, yesterday, when we discussed how to deal with the draft, I asked, why don't you say stop now? And the answer of Christopher Stoppes, for example, for the IFM EU group was, we still think that maybe in the next 2 months the Commission will change the draft. And so we don't yet say no to all that. I think this is unrealistic, especially because this draft was linked to the media. And I think that served the purpose from preventing anybody within the Commission of speaking against this draft. And therefore I think I see zero chance to change the Commission draft. It's different when it goes then to the Parliament. Maybe it stopped in the Parliament, maybe it stopped by the Member States, and of course there will be a different Commissioner. It won't be the same, it will be a new one, and there are rumors that it will be the present Spanish Minister of Agriculture. He is from the derecha, from a right-wing fascist, well, Franco group, sorry. And so we will see what will happen when all these efforts come into hands that are not as well-meaning as the present Commissioner is. I think we will see a story of resilience, that organic agriculture, in the EU, will deal with the perturbations, and I hope as well that the idea of the European Union will be resilient against, let's say, the very difficult ways of the bureaucracy in Brussels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hanspeter. I would like to put the first question to Michel. How do you feel as an experienced inspector and someone who operates in inspection bodies about losing many capacities, many functions in the inspection process? How do you feel about being taken away the right to certify organic operations?
Thank you for the question. It's always challenging to speak after Hanspeter. So it does not mean I have different lectures as Hanspeter, but I think we could see some positive things in moving the control to the DG Sanco or to the former 882. It depends how it will be implemented. And also, I understand the German situation is quite different than the situation in other member states. where the public authority is much more stronger. When I see in Germany, for example, that 5% in some operators are supervised, directly supervised by the authorities, which is not the case in France, in Spain, in Italy, where the authority delegate much more power to the certification bodies, and they confirm they will do not change anything in the futures from their side. And I can believe it because when I know the French situation, I think they have not the means to do it also. In my lecture too, there is also a derogation for the organic sectors. So it means official certificate could be, or can be, also issued by the private control bodies. And they want also to extend, and when you see the amendment in the parliament, they want to extend to the geographical indication because they also work in the same way as organic is working. We will see if this amendment passed through. I guess it's next week, the vote in the parliament for the new official control regulations. So there's the possibility there. But maybe to come back to the first regulation, the 2092, or the situation before. I think the will of this regulation was to, I would say, to harmonize also the situation in the EU, to protect the consumer, that's right, but also to protect the operators. And I think the aim was, at the beginning, was reached. And after years and years, I am the feeling that we, from the private, we'd say, standards to the first regulation, it was the first, I would say, positive progress. And I am the feeling that years after years, it's become worse and worse. And why? Because the sectors is more and more far from decision making. I remember in the 90s, I was also there discussing with the commissions and the French, because we had in this time already a regulation since 1980, 81 in organic, and it was one of the countries having already a national regulation for organic. It was, the work of the Commission was to put, I will say, the principles into the EU legal wording, if I can summarize like this. But the spirit was there, and even sometimes it was difficult to put into official language or in the legal language, but this was the way. And now, as Hanspeter explained very clearly, now we are fully on another concept in approach to writing the organic regulations, and I'm feeling we are far and far and far from what the organic was or is in the practices. And maybe one word is also to what I wait for regulations, and when you change the regulations, it must go in the direction to say easy to read, easy to understand. And I would say it's not easy to answer now. I'm not the feeling that we have simplified the regulations. It's clear it's a complex. Organic is a system. It's complex to, I will say, to translate it into a regulations, because it's quite a complex things for the EU. They are not also aware to have also a regulation concerning all the kind of production, processors, farmers, importers, exporters, certification body, and all in one regulation, which is quite new, or which is do not exist for the other sectors. Even you have one sectors. So it's a complex issue, but I am the feeling we run parallel. The sector is there, the Commission is there, and I know in parallel sometimes they meet together, but it takes time. And I'm a little bit afraid that we lose also the spirit of organic, and that in terms of the development of this sector, this is very important, it has a big impact in climate change, it has a big impact in water management, or in also in the carbon footprint, and so on. We miss really, and there's a difference between making action plans to promote organic and having regulations for organic, which is not speed this development, but will, I would not say stop, but make some barriers to have a development, and also to maintain this confidence to the consumers. And I'm not so sure we are going forward, but I will say we are going backwards.
Well, the funny thing is the Commission had very well understood the concept of having a process described and having the process supervised and not focus on the quality of the chemical quality of the end product. So why not say stop? Why not be radical, Michel?
I belong always to the positive and to maybe naive people. I would say, so the draft as it is now, and it's clear when it's coming into the media. I think it was a good test of the Commission to see how the sector has reacted. This is the normal way to do it. The media is there to be used, and I think it was good to see how they will react, and this is the first. And because to get this document, it's not easy. Even it's going through 5 or 6 different DGs, and I can say I get a call from the GD development and say, oh, we get this document, what do you think about it? I say nothing because I have not. But I believe that then they can begin also to spread it, but I think it's a test. And there's 2 ways also to go, the sector to say stop, or also we know that in this kind of things, and I think each one must take also his responsibilities. The sector has to take its responsibilities, but also the member state. Because it's always too easy to say the Commission is doing, at the end, the member state decide. And in many cases, and we have seen the last GMO, where some people do not vote against, under the German, for example, or they're not for, they abstain, but at the end, it goes through. So I think also the member states should take their responsibility in this. Otherwise, the sectors, I don't know if we should say no at the present times, or if there's a change, because I think the principle driven, the assessment, I would say the assessment is not so bad. But I'm surprised when I read the assessment, I am following also this assessment process, and to see this draft. For me, it's 2 different documents. And the principle driven was good, but I do not see the link with principle driven and a maximum level of pesticide of residues. There's no link. There was an open for group certification, which makes sense if you want to have regulations where you can apply it worldwide. If you want to have compliance, or I don't want to have a discussion between compliance and equivalency. I think we must forget the 2 words. We must think about how the people from third countries can fair access to the market and do not have unfair competition with European farmers. This is, I think, and what I miss in all regulations, in the past regulation, is that we put too much means and criteria and details in the regulations, and we do not focus on the aims, on the objectives we want to reach. And I think we must also have a flexibility and let up to the sectors also to manage these objectives and the way also to reach them. So my position today is from the certification body side, because I think there's also the impact is also quite big in the production rules, stopping some derogations. From our side, I think we are more concerned at the present time by the revisions of A82, because it will give us what kind of delegation we will have. And my lecture today and the competency, I have seen 5 or 6, attend 6 audits from the DG Sanko AVO within the EU and in third countries. And I must say it's the best audit I have never seen since 20 years in the organic done by the authorities. They are competent. We speak the same language in terms of controls. They learn quite very quickly, and I think they are also, and they see also this audit to improve the regulations. That's the reason I'm surprised that we make in this assessment much more weight to the Court of Auditors report, where with something we can also discuss and challenge. It's not because they have written it, it's also everything is true. I prefer to have the report of the DG Sanko done. We have much more strong points where we pointed out to how to improve this. And for the certification body, I think the relationship could be more easy with the DG Sanko when the DG agree because we speak the same language and we are dealing with the same business.
Is it that you speak the same language, Michel? Or would also the Germans and English-speaking countries speak the same language with DG Sanko?
I think it's to speak with people, yes, man, you must meet them. And my feeling is that at the present times, people are spoken about the DG Sanko without to meet them and have discussion with them. I'm also involved in the BTSF program in order to make the training for the different authorities, and they are always present. They come there, the competent authorities are coming there, and they try also to improve their knowledge in organic, but in terms of audit and supervising, it's much more easy to deal with them when people, and the DG Agri was never staff with people dealing with controls and the problematic of controls. The danger I see, and to come back to this, and this is one point, I think it's is if we go to organic product integrity, then this is the big danger that we are moving to. And I think if there would be one reason to say stop to this regulation, it will be this one for me. If this does not change, then we lose the whole experience, all the spirit of the organic. But I would say, in order to go too much in details in this regulation, this is the basic principle that we have in the sectors and in the high farm and so on, is this process approach. This organic is a system, it's not a product, and the integrity is in whole in the system, in the supply chain, and so on. And I think if there is one reason to say no, it is this one, even for the control bodies and also for the sectors.
Okay, the conclusion seems to be very similar between the two experts here on the podium. The concept of having a draft law as a wake-up call to the organic sector is an interesting one, Michel. I was surprised about that notion. Hanspeter, is there anything you want to counterbalance with regard to Michel's notion that DG Sanko is a chance for having more professional inspections?
Could be a chance.
I agree with the assessment that the EU Commission's office in Ireland, there is a special office for supervising the member states' conduct in this field, that makes a pretty good impression. But that's a singularity in the whole context. What I worry about is the extremely rough quality of the draft from, let's say, a working point of view. Practically every single sentence you touch creates problems. The very first sentence in the scope says, we go to the definition of agriculture ingredients, agriculture products in the Treaty of Rome, as it's now in an annex to the present treaty. But because there only non-processed products or just a little bit processed products are in the scope, we add an annex to this regulation in order to deal with that. And somewhere else, the tariff system, the customs tariff code numbers shall be amended to serve the purpose to understand which products fall in the scope of this regulation. This is, excuse me, crazy. Because this is a thing for specialists who deal with customs, with tariffs. The code categories are interpreted to serve that purpose, and it's completely alien to whatever we do in organic food certification. Nobody will be able to deal with that in a reasonable way. But it's not only that. There will be a gap between this annex of this EU or organic food regulation and the tariff system. There is a gap in between. It's similar to the Mate tea issue some of you may be familiar with. What I foresee is a decade of struggle with this because the German authorities, I'm 100% sure, they will check very carefully whether a product is at all in the scope of this, and if it's not in the scope, they will treat it as being outside of the scope. I give you another example. The next sentence is, the products of hunting and fishing of wild animals shall not be considered as organic products. This is in the scope. What happened is, this is already in the present regulation. Wild catch as good as organic. Somebody came to me and asked me, is that legal? Can you refer to organic when you have wild catch? The answer is, a German court in Cologne last year said, well, why not? It's outside of the scope of the EU organic law, and from the viewpoint of the consumers, what could be more organic, more bio than a wild catch from the high seas? And now you would have a situation where, when this stays, you would have wild catch as labeled organic or bio. Craziness. I don't understand what the Commission does. They have lawyers, but obviously they don't ask them.
Anyone in the audience who wants to ask a specific question or wants to comment or wants to challenge, could you just go to the mic? And it would be kind if you just say where you come from.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sankalp. I come from India, and I'm a plant breeder by profession. And I work in Laos, near Thailand, in Southeast Asia. So my question or my concern would be, we have been using organic. It's more related to the third country list or third country producers. So my concern is, we are trying to spread the message in third countries at least, because organic farming, we assume, is partly an answer, an effective way to control many ecological problems that the agriculture has been facing due to intensification. Will this approach going from equivalence to compliance create additional burden to follow certain practices for organic operators, and will it affect, or it might not give any incentive or for newcomers who want to be converted into organic producers? Will it create additional burden for them, and will it be discouraging for those, and also will it be discouraging for people like us who want to spread the message of ecological sustainability and organic farming? So that's my concern. I just want to know your opinion on that. It will be difficult for us to convince people or not. Thank you.
I think we start with Hanspeter and then Michel.
It's very hard to understand what drives the Commission, because the Commission, the legal staff there, they know that the EU is prohibited from asking for compliance, because compliance means one-to-one application of the EU law. When you have a seed data bank requirement, there must be a seed data bank in Nepal, in India, etc. That's not there, and it's not reasonable to ask for it. So I think this has not been thoroughly thought through. I think the legal service of the Commission, the Rechtsförmlichkeitsprüfung, they have not been asked. Strange. So I think that's a point that will change. And if it's not changed now by the Commission, it will at least be changed when this whole thing is notified to the WTO, because there every country may speak up. And the People's Republic of China did last time in 2007 very clearly, and they pointed out what they expect, how this will be implemented, and that was taken into account. So what I can advise you from a third country perspective, make sure that your country, the diplomatic representation in WTO, makes that point clear.
Michel, do you have additional aspects?
For sure. Concerning the question, and I think it's we must come back to 2005, I would say, as the first draft of the regulation 834. There was so many concerns, like GMO or other, because this draft was, I don't want to say worse than this one, but it was for sure not better as this one. And all the sectors, all the people's certification body, myself also first, we are focused on this, and everybody has missed or was do not read the so-called Article 32 and 33 dealing with the import regime. So nobody has challenged this, nobody has seen, and then it's go through, and when it was time to implement, then people saw that it was not possible to do it, or very heavy administrative burden and so on. And the commissions, not to defend the commission, but they have tried with these text to do as better as they could, but they have no means, no money to do it. And but it was like a heritage, I will say, from the previous team, and they have to deal with this. And everybody was concerned that it does not work. Which is very interesting is they have an article already in compliance, and for 2 years ago I discussed with the commission and said, no, we will not implement it because it's not possible. I say, yeah, I agree, because data seed banks, group certification, and so on and so on. For the small, and then I see, and we discuss also with the Commission several times to say, take care, if you go to compliance, it means that there must be one a competent authority. Is this the Commission? Want the Commission to take this over, as the USDA has done, but the USDA has 40 staff members in the team, more than 40 now, and they deal with. It was a choice. It's the same in China, because China, it's very interesting that China is claiming, because they do the same, much more. And sometimes, and I have a feeling, if there's not some unofficial agreements between the US, between China and between the EU, to say, let's move to compliance from each side, and let us have a common agreement, because we know the next trade agreement will be probably Korea and Brazil, and also, but it will take more time, probably China. And I am the feeling that they want to have this kind of trade agreement, and for the other countries, it's not so much important for the commissions. Coming back to the equivalency concept, we have done 2 times the comparison side by side for Korea and Brazil, and it's very long and very difficult work. And it was interesting because it was, you mentioned by the US, some gaps in the equivalency or some troubles because it's equivalent, but it's a big door open in some cases. That's something you can do it in the US, but you are not allowed to do in the EU. So you are really an unfair competitions. My feeling is that we, at the present times, we deal with this problematic. I don't want to deal with equivalency and don't want to deal with compliance. I want to deal with access to the EU market. This must be the first eye, and to see what are the means and the best way to do it. Because if we focus the discussion on equivalency, we have seen equivalency has also not worked well. And there was a lot of also problems with equivalency, because it's also, on the other side, you have some standards, and then you have a competition between the standards in some areas, and they can be also considered as equivalencies, sometimes in some details and so on, and it's a very complex and work to do this comparison side by side. I think we must keep in mind there's also the Codex Alimentarius. So we have already some common understanding worldwide, and why not maybe to move into these directions, and to try to see there's also some worldwide, there's also IFRAM frame standard, even if it's not a detailed standard, but there's some common, and to say maybe on common principles, or on to see if it's standards which can be applied worldwide. Because always the arguments with tropical countries and so on, I think it's, as of my experience in 20 years and in Africa, in Asia and so on, and when I see the 60 standards or the 63 standards, most of them did a copy and paste, and it works. I think it's much more a question of flexibility, because it could be that we have tomorrow in one country, because of the list of input, and if we have not the possibility very quickly to add one, This is what we need, is flexibility. It's not a question of compliance and equivalency. But we must be able, if we have to face, and this is the Commission is not able to do today, if you want to, as a certification body, to change your scope, you have to wait till the end of September, make a new or a revision of your scope, or to add one country, and it takes 1 year again. So we are in a process when somebody wants to be certified in one country and they have something to change, it takes 2 years. And this is not acceptable. I think it's the system which must be completely rethink with the sectors and also according to the international trade agreement or the WTO or trade agreement. But we must think again and not, I'm a little bit afraid that we focus in this dogmatic approach. There's the pro-equivalency and there's the pro-compliance. I think we must maybe build a new way, because we have had both, or try to have both, and no one has worked properly.
Hanspeter?
Let me add an observation. We have the situation that the Commission had been working on this draft since, I think it was May last year, well before the impact assessment and everything else was ready. So it's very clear it's the political position of the DG Agri. And for me it's very clear that the Commission will not change this draft in the next 6 weeks, so it will go to the Parliament and to the Member States as it is. There is a trilogue, it's a trialogue, speaking from 3 sides in an informal way, and the idea is that this trilogue is a possibility to adapt the draft to a common consensus. This does not work in something which is as complex as this. It's much too complex to mend all these very, very many mistakes, just mistakes, things that don't work, but also at the same time change a couple of very basic political standpoints that are integrated in this draft. All this at the same time will never ever work. And that's why I say it would be best if the IFORM EU group and the other actors would say we stop here and we go into a discussion process with the Commission, the sector. When you compare that with the US situation, here the organic unit has 20 staff members, including the secretaries. In the US, we talk about more than 100 persons in doing the same on the federal level in the US. And it's the same complexity. But also in the US, there is a practice, which is when there is a draft, it's published as a draft for public comment, and everybody is asked to suggest changes in the language and to explain why this suggestion is put forward. And all this is put into a public accessibly data bank. And there are thousands of inputs, and the quality of these drafts, it's enormously better than what we have here. There are many aspects I don't like about the US political process, but this I really like very much, because there the organic sector is much more involved and much more expertise from the organic sector goes into the norms. And I don't see why the EU Commission cannot work like this. They can. They are completely free in how they develop the draft. But what they do is power politics, body check politics, really rough play.
Again, the question to the audience, yeah? Would you also say who you are?
Klaus Rapp, organic farmer from Austria. I have 2 questions. First, is my understanding correct that if the certification moves to official controls and from production integrity to product integrity, that even the equivalency path would effectively become impossible for most third countries except the industrialized ones? And the second question is a more general one. Basically, it's about who will own the standard and the process of improving the standard in the future. When I read the Organic Action Plan, I read language that the Commission plans to establish a multilateral international agreement on a standard, which would, in my understanding, effectively move the sector more or less out of the possibility to influence the further developments, because only governments will then negotiate with each other. And would that not be a threat to become less competitive compared to corporate private standards, and therefore in the long term make the organic movement very weak?
Thank you. Who would like to answer the first question first?
No, the second question first. Excuse me. There is a funny thing. You observe it with the transatlantic trade and investment partnership negotiations as well. It's the concept that things like that are negotiated in secret, and not only for a first step, but up to even the judicial, the legal review is done. The whole thing is finished, ready to be signed in many months, even years, and then this is presented to the political decision makers in the parliament. This is a common public international law practice. It's true, it has been common, but it's from the 19th century. It's secrecy in diplomacy. And what you say is perfectly right. When you do that kind of mutual agreements, they are negotiated in secret. And what happened with the US was that it was negotiated over 10 years, and there were issues like antibiotics in fruit growing. They were being dealt with, very fine-tuned, but others, very central political issues, were not taken into consideration. And we, as the sector, we did not really see it, because it was never clear what happened. And I didn't see it as well. So you are right. It's a big problem.
Okay, Michel.
Okay, I will answer to your first question. I do not think that the move to the official control will have a big impact, because it's up to I would say, the third countries how they organize. Where I see a big impact is the move to product integrity. I fully agree. That's the reason for me. I have said, if it's really one reason, and I think this is to say no, is this one, because it changed completely the approach that we have until now. Coming to the multilateral agreement, I have a good example. At the present time, you know, the US has an agreement with the EU and Canada too. But Canada is limited to the products grown in Canada. And they are very sad about this, because they do not understand why the US has and they do not have. And if the product is coming through the US, then it's coming, and there's an agreement between Canada and the US, so it means the products, if it's go through the border, then it's come to the EU and then it's okay. But now the EU is asking Canada to be recognized for the wine. And the Canadian says, okay, but first you recognize us. So it's I think it's a very good example. I take this one because I have discussion with the Commission and also the Canadian people. And when I get this, I say, even the Commission has good reason to say no to Canada, or to limit it to the products in Canada. But since years, and they have good reason, if they have good reason for this, why not? But no, the discussion is not on this level. The discussion is say, I give you this, and you give me this. And this is nothing to do. And then the Commission is always to say to, especially to the certification bodies, say, take care about integrity, take care about integrity, and take care about integrity. And I would say, do it the same. If there's no reasons not to accept Canada or to extend Canada, then we should do it, because I think it's not fair. If their system for import is as good as the one out of the US where we accept, then we must open. Or if we do not open, and the problem I see here is that it's a slow process before to take one decisions. And then we come to this kind of, and then it will be very fast, because there's the Germans, French, and Italian who want to sell their wine to the US. And it will be the reason to say yes. And this is not acceptable.
We have two people who want to say something from the audience, so I would like to take them first.
Jürgen Sanders from the Thünen Institute in Braunschweig, Germany. It's a long time ago, 10 years ago, that the EU Commission proposed the proposal of the current EU legislation. And at least, well, it's a long time ago, but if I remember right, there has been changes in between 2004 and 2007. And my question would be to Mr. Schmidt, what has changed that you are so skeptical that when the Commission is now proposing something, there would be no room for any changes or, let's say, for any substantial changes?
I very well remember to have sat in the rooms of the Commission well before they wrote the draft. There were many meetings well before they wrote the draft where things were discussed like, when you have an irregularity, how do you deal with the aspect of proportionality? It makes a big difference whether you have a pile of raw materials, you test it and you find a residue you don't like, compared to a situation where you have this processed, let's say 20% in a processed product, and millions of packages out in the market which would need to be destroyed if it's no longer organic. So these were complicated questions and they were discussed well before in a 2 years process. Now it's completely different. The Commission wrote the draft on a, let's say, a decision by the Commissioner who wanted to do something good for organics, and a handful of staff members, they wrote down what they thought could be done in order to implement this political decision. That's what I think is quite different.
Laura Montenegro from Argentina.
Laura Montenegro, exactly. My question is for both speakers. I understand that the law is changing, I think it's in the draft. I wanted to know your opinion about the accreditation. What would be the relation between the accreditation bodies and the authorities, and especially what you think would be the future for the IFOAM accreditation system?
Yes, maybe to make it clear, in the draft of regulations, they say that the accreditation body for within the EU or outside also in Europe should be members of European accreditation cooperations, and for the other, in the third countries, the accreditation body must be a member of IAF, which is the International Accreditation Forum, where IOS, the accreditation body for IFOAM, is not member. But they applied for a multilateral agreement, I have heard. So it will be, the probability to get it seems me very difficult, as the members are the competition and want to keep their monopoly. But nobody knows. As I have said, I'm a positive and always, in this case, probably too much naive. But let's say, and I think it's also a way to close the door. And I think it's not good in terms that I think iOS has shown also its competency. And I'm surprised because many scheme owners, FSC and Rainforest and many scheme owners, GOTS and so on, are asking iOS to do the accreditations, and why we do not accept they are also able to do this kind of job. And I think especially in the organic, which is a complex systems, they have auditors and competent people to do it. And I think it's I would say it's a bad game which is played there, and I think we must open the doors to every organizations and people in the sector who are competent. I think they have to pass, they have to be supervised as the other one, but I think it's a chance, and I think it's also for the certification body. I'm working since many years for my organization in accreditation strategy to see which one we should work and so on, and to also to make a risk assessment also for an accreditation body. And if you have no choice, then it's very difficult, and then you are so dependent from one accreditation body and the relationship you have with them, that you are not in a good partnership as it must be. It's the same for the operators. If they will have worldwide only one CB, it's easy. For the CB, not for the operators.
I summarize. The target is to kick IFORM out, the IOS. The background is there has been a discussion between the IOS and the EU Commission for years now, how to read the present law on accreditation bodies, and it's quite clear that the present law would not prevent the IFORM system to work in the field of third countries. They are allowed to do so, and what the Commission does now is try to introduce into an EU law a practical prohibition.
There is a chance that IOIS apply for being in the IOIS?
From my point of view, yes, they have applied, but I don't think they have a chance. Why? Accreditation has been identified as a state task, as a governmental task in the national systems. For example, in Germany, there is one single company, it's a private company, but publicly owned, and it's entrusted with a public function, so it's a part of the public administration, only one single body, and that's the same in the other EU countries. So they have the idea there is only one accreditor for one nation state, and these accreditors, they are joined together in the IAF.
There is time for one more question from the audience or a comment, if there is someone who wants to make a comment.
I hope we did not shock you too much.
So there is agreement on the podium of the experts that it's better to stop the draft now, because there are essential dangers to the concept of organic farming in Europe as we have known it for decades now. In some aspects, at least Michel sees hope, but he agrees that the question of moving from a systems approach of organic farming to one that looks on the analytical quality of the end products is detrimental, and so the answer can only be no to the present draft. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you to the audience for listening so attentively. I close the session.